Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Father Roflin, for this introduction. In fact, I understand that it's so important, this kind of encounter we have now, because we are facing so many challenges, as you mentioned, and it makes the mission of the Ricci Institute even more vital and more important. So in fact, I was planning, in fact, to go to Macau to attend the meeting myself. But in mainland China now, I mean, even though technically, I mean, we are free to travel, but concretely, in fact, you need a lot of authorization. And in my own by a university, in fact, if you want to leave the city of Guangzhou, you needed to ask for permission, and sometimes the permission, in fact, are not granted, all of that. And so it makes travels still now very, very difficult inside China. So that is a situation we are facing, not only for the faculty, but also for the students. So we have a very not much ability to travel. And so probably, I mean, I will discuss later what Dr. Barbosa discussed about the question of the internationalization of the Chinese university, and what kind of direction it may take. So today I have prepared my talk into, in fact, two parts. So I'm going to share with you my PowerPoint. So I hope you can see it. So in fact, the two parts, first I will talk about Matteo Ricci and I mean the book I have published recently, and some ideas behind that. And the later part will be about the current academic landscape today in China. Okay. So first about this small book, I mean, about Matteo Ricci. This publication, in fact, it is a request which was given to me by the director of the Ricci Institute in Taipei, Father Olivier Lardinois, and he approached me telling me that there was a need to write a book about Matteo Ricci for a collection in Belgium. It is a collection called Fidélité. It's a Jesuit press. And we have a collection about, it's called in French, Sur la route des saints. So what it means, Sur la route des saints, it means people who are not right now canonized, and not necessarily already canonized, but also the people who may be towards canonization, like Matteo Ricci, we hope next year. I mean, not for canonization, but next year will be perhaps the first step will be what we call to announce the virtues and the heroic virtues of Ricci. So that should be next year, and after that will lead the path toward a beatification and to be declared as a blessed. And the next step, of course, will be canonization, but that is still some way along the road. So La Route des Saints is open to people who are not yet officially canonized, people like Matteo Ricci. So I would like to say in what spirit I have written this small book. So in fact, my idea was not to write what we called traditionally as a hagiography. That it is, of course, the traditional style of the life of the saints in the Catholic Church, but hagiography, it is considered something as a kind of enterprise of glorification, to glorify Ricci. And in fact, we can see that this trend was already, just after the death of Ricci, was already on the way. And because Ricci has left us what we called his journal, and or the note at the end of his life about his experience in China. And in Italian, it is called Della Entrata. And so Della Entrata is about the entry, of the Society of Jesus and the Catholic Church into China. And so entrata is kind of quite a very neutral expression. But when Trigo took over the Italian manuscript and it translated into Latin, so it was, and after it was translated into European languages, so it was from entrata, it became a kind of expedition, something much more grandiose. And so we see that Ricci, after his death, very quickly there is this tendency to write this kind of hagiography, and that was very true also in the context, of course, of the right controversy, and to put him in such a high position as a kind of hero of the cause. But in fact, I think that this kind of style perhaps is not really proper to what I wanted to do. So something also, another possibility, it is to write a biography. And so a biography, in fact, we have already a very good biography of Ricci, for example, in English, by Professor Rodicia, very detailed and very academic. So a biography trying to give all the context and to explain with all the historical details what Ricci did and what is the significance. But in fact, for this collection, I think that a biography was not really proper to do this kind of very heavy academic style. Another possibility would have been to write a kind of a work of spirituality about Ricci. And that will be perhaps more proper to this collection. The problem we face with that is that Ricci has left very little about his own spiritual life. So I think that Ricci has left little in terms of spiritual notes. And so we do not have the notes of his retreat. So what is closer to that probably is in the letters, and especially in the letters that he writes to his family or to his friends, where somehow he's going to loosen up a bit, to talk more about his feelings. But still, it is very, very little materials that we have in these letters somehow to reconstruct what will be the spirituality of Ricci, and what will be the connection with, for example, with Ignatian spirituality. So it's very hard to do this kind of reconstruction because of lack of material. So what I came out as intending to do is something perhaps more simple. It is to write a kind of life of Ricci, which somehow describe his own journey, and to do it with the kind of humility of Ricci. Because when Ricci approaches China, probably also is filled also with also grandiose ideas about conversion, and because he can see that in Japan there is a model of conversion. In Japan at that time there were thousands and thousands of people converting to Christianity. There were martyrs, Japanese people able to sacrifice their life for Christ. So there was also very attractive, I should say, a model of mission. Or there was also the Philippines, and the Philippines where you had also a mass conversion. And so Ricci probably, when he came to China, also he had the ideas, and perhaps the natural ideas, to say, okay, we are going to start a mission, so we are going to start to build the churches, to build the seminaries, and we are going to build the schools. But in fact, not very little of that will happen. And so somehow is going to be the process of Ricci, of his own humility, which is to recognize the reality of China and to adapt to it, because to recognize that through this process of adapting to reality, it is a process of embracing Christ. And so it is through this conversion, I should say, spiritual conversion of Ricci, that is going through his mission in China to have a very simple intuition, but a very deep intuition, and that is going to try step by step. And so in Guangdong, he has a very very bad experiences, I should say, in Jiaoqing, but also in Shaoguan. And when he leaves Guangdong, he goes to Jiangxi province, and there again he's going to start again. But so he decided in Nanchang that he's going to have in the residence, the Jesuit residence, he does not try to fit, to arrange the main hall of the Jesuit residence as a chapel, but in fact, what he tries to do is to try to arrange the main hall as a kind of a place to receive the people, receive the literati. And so we see along all his path is going to go toward this process of humility. So I should say something about the subtitle of that book, À la découverte du Christ chinois. So of course, I mean, this title can be misread, misinterpreted. I mean, what is the Chinese Christ? So what I wanted to mean by the Chinese Christ is that the idea, I think, this intuition that Ricci did not really spell out like that, but it is the intuition that somehow Christ already was preceding him in China. So that he was able to discover through the Chinese culture, through his encounter with the Chinese classics, also the stones that were left about the Holy Spirit, about the presence of Christ already in Chinese culture. And so that he was able to find the ideas of Shangdi, the ideas of the spirit, etc., inside the classics and inside also the Chinese culture. And so why I decided to put that title. I would like also to mention, I mean, talking about this book, something that I recently also discovered about Ricci letter. So we have from Ricci 54 letters, and those 54 letters have been already published by Delia and by Quodlibet. And so Quodlibet in 2001 and had published in Italian. Most of the letters are in Italian, only a couple of letters are in Portuguese. And so we have those 54 letters of Ricci. But what is very interesting and very important is that recently there was a Chinese edition, and the letters of Ricci were translated into Chinese, and which is very interesting because Ricci initially wrote those letters in Italian for his friends in Italy, and so 400 years later, those letters were translated and by Professor Wenzheng at Beihai and revised by Professor Eugenio Menegan. And so they are translated into Chinese, which is very meaningful, this kind of circulation of letters from language into another language, into Chinese. And so among the letters published in 2018 in Chinese, we have a letter which had never been published before. It is to say that a letter which was not published by Delia and was not published by Quodlibet. And so this letter, I think, is very important. And the first time was published into Chinese. And so even the Italian text original has not been published yet. And so this letter, in fact, it was addressed to Antonio Maria Ricci in 1605. And this letter, it is very important because Matteo Ricci mentioned that he's starting to use the Chinese ritual. And so that it means that before 1605, he was very reluctant to use the Chinese ritual. But something happened in 1605, he started to use them. So we do not know really how he was doing that. Was it inside the church, or was it outside? In what way he was participating himself, or he was allowing Chinese Catholic to perform those Chinese rituals? So there is still a lot of uncertainty about that. But that it is a very big change, because he mentioned in this letter that since they are starting to use a Chinese ritual, he has noticed a radical change in the attitude of the literati. So that it means that starting from that date, the Chinese literati now, they are more willing to come to the church in Beijing and to meet. And so that was a completely change. And so I think we see already that Ricci already made this kind of move. So of course, somehow later it will become very controversial, because it will become the controversy about the Chinese right, and very divisive. But I think I was very happy doing my research recently on Ricci to do also to discover this letter published for the first time in Chinese in 2018. Okay, so now I would like to change now to my second topic, which is about the landscape of the dialogue with China today. So basically, I will have first part talk about the direct effect of the COVID, second about the long-term consequences, and perhaps the third part about opportunities. Okay, so first about the direct effect of the COVID. So in fact, it comes with a kind of increased bureaucratic control of a student, a faculty, and staff. And so that is something which is very pervasive today in the management of the university, because many resources of the university, many staff of the university, many spiritual energies of everybody is geared toward this management of the COVID. So concretely, it means that we have hundreds of staff in our university, hundreds of staff every day sending messages, contacting students, contacting faculty, reminding the regulation, things like that. And those regulations, which every day, or not every day, I should say, every 10 minutes, they are updated. So every day we are receiving tens of new regulation of messages about how to adjust and how to do the COVID test, which are now basically every day. And so a lot of energy now is geared toward that. And that has been somehow going on for already 2 years and a half. And so that has been, 2 years and a half, we have been living into this kind of very, very heavy bureaucratic control. So that, of course, it has very concrete repercussion, consequences on the daily life of the university, and because that became the first focus, and the first focus that we need to comply to those regulation before doing anything else. And so it has also consequences in terms of the teaching, in terms of the research, all of that. And so, this system somehow, because it wants to, of course, to prevent any case of COVID, so it has also, the system has a kind of rigidity and aberration, because everybody needs to go along with the guideline. I give you, for example, I have one of my students for already more than 8 months. He has been, he obtained a scholarship from the Chinese government to study in the USA. So he lives in the USA, but he's still required by our university every day. I don't know at what time of the day. Every day he has to report his COVID situation, even though he's not in the country. So you see, all these kind of things, I mean, we could give 1,000 and 1,000 of examples of things, of this kind of formalism, which is very rigid. And behind is the idea that to avoid any risk. So to avoid any risk, in fact, is to multiply regulation, and but the multiplication of regulation somehow is kind of a perverse system. The perversities become, many of these things become completely adding to each other, but without real efficiency. And so that it is become a kind of problem. So what are the long-term effects of this? So perhaps I should say that because so much energy is focused on this, so perhaps in terms of the quality teaching, there is a kind of, I should say, a lowering, but we are not paying too much attention to the quality of the teaching, because we have to spend so much time dealing with this thing. And so I should say that we could see that, I mean, at Yat-Sen, we have been spared, because we didn't have recourses too much to the online classes. We still have this kind of online classes because perhaps you know, Yat-Sen, we have not only one campus in Guangzhou, but another campus in Shenzhen and one in Zhuhai. And so for a few weeks already, the university does not allow the kind of move between a campus. So it means that students and faculty cannot move around between a campus, all of that. And so it means that also sometimes the students and the teacher have to do the teaching online. But of course, in mainland China, in many places, it has been, I should say, the kind of the situation. I have some parents who told me in Beijing that their daughter in Beijing, for the last 3 years, has been taking all the classes online. And they live in Beijing, but the campus for already 3 years has not been open to the students. And so for 3 years, all the courses she has taken from house, from a home. So you see how that may affect the teaching and the quality of the teaching. And so that the situation in Beijing, but also there are many examples in many other cities, not only undergrad students, but also graduate students not being able also to enter the campus, all of that, and all the faculty. So that and that has a long-term effect on the students, because the students, of course, they are going to spend more time on the internet, and the internet, I think, is a great tool. But the problem of internet somehow that if you do not direct the students how to use internet, how to find resources, to make their own evaluation, to see what is the quality of the information that they find. So probably they completely lose themselves into the web. And so that it is a problem of many students now spending too much time on the internet without direction. So, I mean, Professor Barbosa was mentioning the problem of the internationalization of our universities. So that also, it has been a very big problem, because for 2 years and a half, international students have not been allowed to come back to China. And so that it was a very detrimental for those international students, because many of them, they were engaged into a program and to get a degree, and their study was stopped, and stopped already for 2.5 years, 3 years, and without any idea when they can come back. And so that has very dire consequences on those students for their career, and because without a degree, and so it's going to be a very big consequence for their career. So right now, I mean, the Chinese government, I mean, in Beijing, they say, okay, we want to open, so we want to open and to allow international students to come back. Okay, so that it is the level of Beijing. But from Beijing, the time that all is going to goes down to all the universities, that is going to take months and months. And because each university wants to protect themselves, and so they don't want to take any risk. And so they are delaying the process. And so even if the students may get a visa from his embassy abroad, still he needs the university to allow him to come back. And so that also is plenty of condition, of course, in terms of quarantine, etc., etc. So things are not yet in place, as we see in China. We haven't seen yet any international students coming back, and so that it has been also a loss, not only for students but also for our Chinese students, because they were also benefiting of this international surrounding, and which now we don't have anymore. Also, in terms of faculty, also it has been a big problem, because many faculties have decided they had no choice somehow, because they could not come back to mainland China because they didn't get a visa, or the problem also of plane ticket, problem of quarantine, etc. So it has meant that faculties, we have lost plenty of international faculties the last 3 years. And in terms of conferences, also it has been a very big consequences, because all the conferences we have practically now, they are online, not only international, of course, but even national conferences. Still, it's very hard to do it on site, because each university wants to protect themselves. So even if you invite people, a speaker to come to your university, in fact, they may not be allowed to enter the campus. So you have to arrange housing outside of the campus, but that makes things also very complicated, and so that also it has been a consequence, because we have lost this kind of interaction, academic interaction between the faculty, and so it has impaired the kind of ability to exchange. So now, if we want to look at opportunities, my last point is that, in fact, this situation perhaps may be good, in fact, to develop more personal relation among the students. And because the students now, they are, of course, they may lose themselves into the internet, but also there may be also other possibilities if they can build again a new relationship among themselves, among the roommates, among also people from the same batch of students, from the same department, to spend more time on reading groups and to read together books, things like that. So that can be also an opportunity. Also, it can be an opportunity, I should say, between faculty and students, because the faculty, we cannot travel as much as in the past, and so now we have more time, in fact, to be in the site, and so we have more time to, in fact, spending with students, to direct them, to have interpersonal interaction, to direct their studies for the master degree or doctorate or even undergrad students. So that also it can be an opportunity, and if we can catch this opportunity, it could be something also very valuable. So I should say that we do not know yet when we can come back to a normal situation, but I think everybody now, we have lost hope that we in the short time we may come back to the pre-COVID situation. Is to say that even after the Congress, the situation is going to stay like that for some time, and so we still have to live into that present situation without thinking, escaping into a kind of future things that we don't know when it will happen, but try already in the present situation, try to do the best we can. So thank you very much. That is my little contribution to the conference. Thank you.